What's up, guys? Hey, it's Clint Coons here. And in this video, I'm going to be walking you through, if you're a first-time real estate investor and you're buying that property, how to properly structure it for asset protection purposes. All right, so what am I referring to here? Let's say that you're just getting started in real estate investing. You've heard all about land trusts, limited liability companies, limited partnerships, corporations, and your head's just spinning. You're thinking, what do I need to do? What should I set up right away before I buy that first property? Let me tell you this, take a breath. That is not the most important thing. The most important thing when it comes to real estate investing is actually buying real estate. Land trust, LLCs, corporations, all that stuff is really important, and you should factor that into protecting your properties. But here's the thing. Knowing how you're going to acquire that property is so important when it comes to real estate investing, because that's going to drive the decision that we're going to make on the back end on how best to structure it. So what am I thinking of? Well, if you're going to buy your first property, you're using a qualified mortgage, some of that Freddie Fannie, and it's a single family, if it's residential real estate, then you're going to be required to take title in your own name. So just don't worry about the entities right now, because you have to close in your own name. Now, maybe if you're fortunate enough that you've set up a relationship with a community bank, and they're going to issue you a non-qualified mortgage. And all that means is that it's not going to be sold to Freddie Fannie, so there are different underwriting guidelines there. Well, then maybe you're going to want to consider the strategy I'm going to share with you and start there. But most of the investors that we talk to when they're first getting started, they're typically using the Freddie Fannie type qualified mortgages to buy their first rental property. Maybe it's because your daughter's going to college down at the University of Arizona and you want to set up a house and then rent out rooms to people. And so you're going to buy that property possibly as a second residence and then start renting it out. Whatever the case is, when you're buying that property, typically you're going to take title in your own name. Now, so here you are, you bought that first house and your first rental, and it's sitting in your own name. Now you can appreciate there's risk associated with that. You talk to other real estate investors and they say, what, you got a property in your own name or rental? Are you crazy? If something goes wrong, you're going to be sued. You're renting it out to students. That's just nuts because they like to drink and party. More liability for you. So you thinking, I got to get this out of my name. What should I do? Well, the first thing you have to look at is what type of mortgage did you use to qualify to buy this house? Did you buy it as a secondary residence? Is that the type of mortgage you use? Because if you bought this using a loan that say it's going to be a secondary residence for you and now you're going to turn it into investment property, then you have to be careful about something that's referred to as the due on sale clause. That means if you were to transfer title to this real estate over to a limited liability company, if you were to move it over to this LLC, then your lender could accelerate the note and call that note due. Now, I don't want to see you put yourself in that situation if you have one of those types of loans. So we're not going to use this strategy right away. On the converse side, if you didn't use that type of loan, it was an investment loan, conventional loan, investment property, well then you could actually set up a limited liability company and deed your property directly into the LLC. So again, you're going to set up an LLC, but you're going to set it up after you've closed on the property. If you were a new investor and this was a property that you're working with a non-qualified mortgage lender like a community bank, then you should have gone down to the bank before closing and asked them whether or not you could close in the LLC, whether or not they'd finance a property and allow you to close in it. Many times the answer is going to be yes. So another option you have that we talk to investors about, if they have this property and they bought it as a secondary residence, which a lot of investors do because they get the cheaper money to set that deal up, smaller down payment. You don't want to risk having the note called. So what you could consider setting up is what's referred to as a land trust. All right, you can set up a land trust. Now, a land trust is a grantor trust. It's like a living trust that we use for estate planning. And if you set up this guy right here, you can deed your property into the land trust, typically without fear of the bank ever accelerating the note. Because if the lender was to look, they're going to see properties now held in this trust name, and they're going to assume that you set up the trust for estate planning reasons, which there could be a component of that in the creation of this trust. But the real reason why we're using this particular type of vehicle, and if you're not familiar with it, check out my YouTube channel. I have plenty of videos on land trusts that you can explore to understand this in more depth and all the different uses associated with it. So set up a land trust and move your property into the land trust like this. And so now it's held in there, and you're going to be what's called the beneficiary of this trust, which means you're the owner of that land trust. And as the beneficiary, you're entitled to control it, to get all the rents and everything that come from the trust. But the problem is if you're just starting out as a real estate investor and you hold this land trust as is, if anything goes wrong with that property, well, there's no asset protection there, except in Florida. So if you're looking for asset protection, you have to go to that next level and create that limited liability company and then move that land trust into the LLC. And the way you do that is via an assignment. That is, you take your beneficial interest and you transfer it in with this one piece of paper that states, I, Clint Coons, hereby assign my land trust to this limited liability company. And now you make the LLC the beneficiary. So when the LLC becomes the beneficiary of your land trust and you own the LLC, the way the money flow works, because I mean, that's really why we're investing, is you just have your tenants here pay the LLC directly. Just collect all the rents down here and then you distribute them out to yourself. You could even pay the mortgage and everything else out of that limited liability company. All the expenses can come out of there and whatever left can come down here and hit your pocket individually. Now, that's how we look at structuring the first rental property that somebody's going to buy. Typically, they're using those loans. They have to take title in their own name. Then it's a question of, do we go directly to the LLC or we go directly to a land trust? And that's going to be driven by the type of loan you got. Now, on top of that, the other thing we want to look at is, let's say you're going to acquire that second property. So ideally, you should use another or separate limited liability company for your second property. That is, set up this mirror image structure and then go about it that way for the best asset protection. But I've run into plenty of real estate investors at first, when they get that second property, they just don't have the money to invest to set up a second LLC, but they still want some asset protection. Well, here's what you could do on the second deal. Again, when I buy this second property here, why not move it into another land trust? So I'll set up another land trust down here. So now I have two land trusts that I've created. I would be the initial beneficiary. You have to do it this way to start with. And I got the property. I've transferred my property into it. So now my property is held by that land trust. You could, if you'd like, take that land trust and move it also into that LLC. So now you got two land trusts in one limited liability company. Now there is some risk there, because if anything goes wrong with one land trust, then that puts at risk this property and this other trust as well, because land trusts do not offer asset protection. But as a beginning investor, you're at that point where you're thinking, all right, I'm going to take on a little more risk here until I build up some more cash flow. Then I want to actually set up a second LLC and do this deal right. Well, by working with land trusts, what you're doing for yourself is you're putting yourself in a position that when you're ready to set up this second LLC over here, it's going to be really easy for you to transition out of this dual land trust structure in one LLC into a structure where you have one land trust per. And what do I mean by that? Well, by using the land trust, when I'm ready to move it out of this LLC here, all I have to do is reverse it. Assign the interest back to myself via one piece of paper, and then take that and assign it over to the LLC. So essentially what will occur is this trust now, by doing what I just showed you, will be owned right up here. Here's my land trust. It'll be owned by my limited liability company over here. So now I've been able to split it up. There's no deeds that have to be filed. No one will see that transfer from here to here because it's all private. So as a beginning real estate investor, if you're thinking, what do I need to be looking at right now from an asset protection standpoint? How should I be structuring it? The two entities you should be most concerned about setting up is going to be one, a land trust, and another is this LLC to protect yourself, protect your beneficial interest in your trust. That's where I see a lot of real estate investors, I direct them when they're first getting started. I think it offers the protection they're looking for, and it gives them the flexibility. So as when they start to grow, we're minimizing the complications to extricate ourselves out of a less than ideal structure into a more protected environment. Hey, if you want to learn more about these types of strategies and what they can do for you, I'd like to invite you to my tax and asset protection workshop that I teach on Saturday. There's a link below on the next event that you can catch it, where for an entire day, you're going to get a complete download on how to use structures like this for your real estate investing. And then we're going to show you how real estate can create massive tax deductions for you on the planning side. So I invite you to that. And by the way, when you come and you join me on the tax and asset protection event, the best thing about it is that we'll have a team of attorneys there answering your questions. So bring all the questions you have about entity structuring, because they'll be answered live by my support staff of attorneys and actual tax preparers. Look forward to seeing you there.